Hey everybody, I'm Jay Privman along with Marty McGee. You've been following us along for many months now as we took you through the elongated Derby Watch run-up and the Derby 4 weeks ago. But now we're at the last leg of the Triple Crown, and as you can see, Marty is on scene at Pimlico for the Preakness Stakes on Saturday. Marty, how's it going back there?
It's going all right. It's so weird though, Jay. I mean, there were just maybe a dozen media people out by the Preakness barn this morning, and it's going to get dark here behind me pretty soon, which it doesn't do in May, and this is the end of September, and there's all kinds of stuff, they've got these chalets out front. I counted them. There's 26 chalets out on the apron. That's just for the owners and their guests on Saturday, but no fans, obviously, which makes it a Triple Crown sweep for no spectators because of this COVID. But it's going to be a good race. We're going to talk about that, and so we got that.
Well, we're going to be taking your questions a little bit later, and we also have a very special guest joining us, our old friend Randy Moss, who Marty and I have known for a long time. You're well familiar with his work with NBC. He'll be joining us in about 10 or 15 minutes to talk about the Preakness Stakes on Saturday. And Marty, before we talk about the Preakness, and before even we sort of recap the Kentucky Derby, I just wanted to get some thoughts from you on just, you give a little bit there about being in Baltimore, but you've got some background in being at Baltimore and covering the Preakness Stakes for a number of years, because you had another life before working for the Daily Racing Form that took you to Baltimore for a while. Tell everybody about that.
Well, it was my first time in racing. I graduated from the University of Kentucky in 1982, and I worked for my dad for a couple of years and said, man, I gotta do what I want to do, which was write about horse racing. So my first job was here in March of '85 for the Sports Eye. They were quickly put out of business by Daily Racing Form, so I went jobless. I did get to go to Bowie that summer a little bit, the last summer at Bowie. But anyway, signed on with the Sun in July of '85 and worked for them till January of '92. So it was 6.5 years or so here in Maryland. I loved it. I still actually come back here on my own dime just to see old friends and spend some time at Ocean City and on the Chesapeake Bay and things like that. So it's a heck of a place. Had crab cakes last night for dinner. So everything's good here in Maryland, and they're really proud of this race here, Jay, and rightfully so. And even though there's not a Triple Crown on the line, there seems to be quite a bit of excitement for it.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to that race on Saturday, and we'll be previewing it in just a few minutes. But I think to preview the Preakness Stakes, it's probably smart to go back and take a look at the Kentucky Derby, which was run 4 weeks ago. Marty was obviously there for that as well. This has been, I'm going to go 0 for this year's Triple Crown. It'll be the first time since 1982 that I'll go 0 for on this year's Triple Crown, but that's the way things are in 2020. But let's take a look at the Kentucky Derby from 4 weeks ago, won by Authentic, defeating the favorite Tiz the Law. Marty, what was your overall takeaway of this race?
Oh gosh, I thought that Authentic kind of stole the race. If he hadn't had the open air outside box where the air is fresh and clear, I don't think that Johnny Velasquez would have been allowed to just smooth him. And I mean, really smooth him. He didn't even bother having him change leads until about a 16th of a mile before the wire the first time. And then the only really challenge that came to him was Tiz the Law, and we know what happened after that. So it was a brilliant ride by Johnny Velasquez, a brilliant training job by Bob Baffert. He was 8-1. I don't know since I did miss that wedding, I don't know if I want to go to the funeral on Saturday, as they say. But nonetheless, he was the best horse in Derby 146. Yeah, this is Preakness 145.
When they turned into the stretch that we're watching right now, and Tiz the Law ranged up outside of him, did you think Authentic was going to hold on, or do you think Tiz the Law was beating him at that point?
Well, I'd like to ask you that, because I thought at the quarter pole, when Tiz the Law put his head in front, I thought you could have put a big X through Authentic, and I just started looking for who else might be coming, because I thought Tiz the Law had him, because obviously the way he ran in both the Belmont and the Travers was that he just swooped on past whoever was there and went on to win by open lengths. But clearly that was not the case in the Derby.
So Tiz the Law is not running in the Preakness Stakes on Saturday. He's being freshened until the Breeders' Cup Classic. But a number of horses, Marty, are coming out of the Derby and are running back in the Preakness. Let's talk about a couple of those, and I just want to get your takeaway on them. First off, Mr. Big News was a horse that I gave a long shot look to in the Derby, and he certainly outran his odds that day. What did you think of his race?
I thought it was awesome. I mean, he was clearly third best in the race. And at a ever so fleeting moment there nearing the quarter pole, I thought this horse is going to win. Because if the other two had just kind of tired themselves out and Mr. Big News had sustained his run, he could have gone on past. I mean, we've seen more unlikely things happen. But he did flatten out a little bit, but overall it was a terrific effort. He was one of the last-minute entries into the Derby. They actually announced it about an hour before entries were taken on the Tuesday before the race. So I know that Brett Calhoun, his trainer since then, has been extremely pleased with the way he's trained. I saw Brett early this morning. The horse went out at 6 o'clock, and Brett was already giving him his bath about 6:30, and everything's good for him. So, I think he won't be the 46-1 that he was in the Derby.
Right.
Keith Fustel, the line maker, has him 12-1. So I think that's about right.
You're saying you were out this morning, and obviously you'll be out every morning this week. What's the long-range forecast for Preakness Day Saturday, by the way?
Perfect. It rained overnight here last night, Tuesday into Wednesday, and the track was very sloppy this morning. They ended up sealing it at the 8 o'clock break so that most of the Preakness horses could train over a more even surface. That's the end of it. It's supposed to be sunny, kind of cool, getting into the 40s every night and reaching the mid-60s during the day, but absolutely no rain in the forecast all the way through the weekend.
Well, let's talk about a couple others that are coming out of the Derby that we just watched a moment ago and get your thoughts on that. First off, Max Player. Marty, this is a horse that I think has continued to make good progress. I thought he was a significant cut below the best 3-year-olds back in February, but I liked his race in the Belmont. I thought he was making good forward progress for Linda Rice, and I thought he continued to take a step forward in the Derby, running on to finish 5th in his first start for Steve Asmussen. What was your thought about Max Player's last race?
I thought it was good. It was sneaky good. He rallied to be a pretty respectable 5th. And what kind of surprised me even more, Jay, was we didn't really have him on our radar until about 10 days ago or so, when Steve came out and said that he's going to run all 3 of his horses, Accession, Max Player, and Pneumatic. And when talking to Steve about Max Player, I was somewhat taken aback in how enthusiastic Steve was about him. He said he came out of the Derby great. He's really liked both of his 2 works, and Steve Asmussen's pretty bullish on Max Player, which makes me think, without giving away who I really like in this race, that Max Player is a must-use in the gimmicks in the Preakness.
And then the last one I want to talk about is New York Traffic. He's also running back in the Preakness after running in the Derby. I thought, Marty, he had the kind of race where he just wasn't good enough. He was trying to press Authentic. He couldn't go by him, and he just yielded down the stretch. And I don't see a good way that this race comes up for him on Saturday. What did you think of the way he ran in the Derby?
Yeah, I mean, as much as we had talked about him a lot, about how consistent he had been and how game he had been, and it was just the reverse in the Derby. He had a great trip, like at the half-mile pole, there he was right behind Authentic, and if he was good enough, he would have gone up and challenged him. Instead, he was one of the ones backing up. I think he faded to 8th. Apparently, he has trained well enough that Saffie Joseph and all of his owners thought, well, let's go on and give it one more try. This is the last classic for 3-year-olds, etc. But you would think that given the pace scenario with Swiss Skydiver and Art Collector and Authentic, and maybe even 1,000 Words, it might be a little crowded up front, and it's hard, as you said, to envision a scenario whereby he would emerge victorious.
Then the last horse I want to talk about before we bring in Randy Moss is the biggest name who missed the Kentucky Derby, and that's Art Collector. By the way, if you get a chance, Marty wrote a fantastic feature on his trainer, Tommy Drury, that's online at drf.com. Art Collector couldn't run in the Kentucky Derby. He is, though, coming back in the Preakness Stakes. His last race was the Ellis Park Derby. We'll take a look at that race now. But, Marty, what are your thoughts on Art Collector? And I'll actually, before I get that from you, I think his defection from the race, from the Derby, really was one of the unseen elements that contributed to Authentic's success that day. Both he and King Guillermo coming out, I think, softened up the potential pace of that race. So that said, your thoughts on how Art Collector's bounced back from having to miss the Derby?
I mean, absolutely. I thought it was a huge thing, both of those horses coming out. Art Collector came out on Tuesday, King Guillermo came out on Thursday, and on Saturday there was Authentic all by himself on the lead. So I don't think that, it's kind of hard. I think it's kind of tricky here, Jay, with Swiss Skydiver and Art Collector coming in and 1,000 Words coming in. He's liable to show some speed too. So it's a little tricky, the pace scenario here. But Art Collector, by all accounts, he only missed 4 days of training with that blip that is strictly a non-factor going into the Preakness, the minor hoof injury that he had the Monday before the Kentucky Derby. And Tommy could not be happier with him. And I love the way this horse goes. He struck a very imposing figure here this morning. And it's all systems go for Art Collector.
Well, that's our thoughts on the horses that are coming out of the Kentucky Derby, and probably the main horse coming into the Preakness who did not run in the Derby. Well, let's get thoughts on all those horses from our one special guest on this broadcast today, and that's Randy Moss. He's a longtime friend of both Marty and I's. We've known him for a long time. As you know, he does a fantastic job for NBC, but he's got his hands on a lot of other things, including helping to make Beyer speed figures. Randy, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Pleased to see you guys. Pleased to be a part of this, and anything for DRF, America's Turf Authority, since 1894. Some of the furniture behind Marty McGee, I think, dates back to about 1894 in the Pimlico press box.
That press box.
1947, something like that, Randy.
All right, close enough.
Randy, Marty and I were just talking about our impressions of the Derby, so I just wanted to get yours, not only in terms of the way that Authentic performed and who maybe coming out of the Derby might have had a compromised trip, if anybody, but also our thoughts that we think the pace of the Derby was impacted by the weak developments leading up to it regarding the defections of King Guillermo and Art Collector. So just sort of put all that into the soup mix and let us know what you thought of all of that.
I thought that was brilliant analysis, Jay and Marty. First of all, I thought the Derby result was almost like a perfect storm in favor of Authentic. First of all, I think you had what I consider to be Bob Baffert's best Triple Crown training job of all of his 16 Triple Crown race wins. To take a horse that's not especially bred for 1.25 miles, top or bottom, to take a horse that certainly looked in the Haskell like he wanted no part of 1.25 miles, to really crank up his training. And not only to get him to go 1.25 miles, but to actually show determination in that last eighth of a mile. But it was also, I totally agree with you, impacted by the lack of a pace challenge in the middle part of the race. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily the first part of the race. I think Authentic was the fastest horse in the Derby early. I think he's going to be the fastest horse in the Preakness early. Looking at pace figures and pace scenarios, fractional studies and all that, I think Authentic is a faster horse than Art Collector, is a faster horse than Swiss Skydiver, and a faster horse than New York Traffic. I think he will be on the lead, and probably a clear lead. But in the Derby, there was nobody in the middle part of the race to take him on. New York Traffic wasn't the same horse that we saw in the Haskell. He had, like Marty said, he had a perfect trip, and then he started to backpedal. Manny Franco had Tiz the Law rated exactly where he wanted him to be rated. I think Manny Franco thought that Authentic wasn't going to get the 1.25 miles, and there was no reason to go up and challenge him any earlier than he did. And so that enabled John Velasquez on Authentic to employ the strategy he wanted to employ, that he said post-race was his goal, to wait as long as he could before he asked Authentic, until he saw the white face of Tiz the Law next to him. And he was able to pull that off. In the Preakness, though, I think Art Collector is good enough, and Swiss Skydiver potentially good enough, to be able to turn up the heat on Authentic in the middle part of the race when they're going down the back stretch, and possibly not let him get away with the same sort of relaxed pace for as long as he got away with in the Kentucky Derby. That's the way I see it.
Was there anybody else coming out of the Derby itself that's running back in the Preakness who you think might have had a compromised trip, or, as you just alluded to in the case of New York Traffic, really didn't have an excuse?
I'm not as high on Max Player as you guys are. I thought his Derby was a few lengths off of his Travers for whatever reason. I don't know why. He was back there with Honor AP and actually had a better trip than Honor AP. And Honor AP blew his doors off around the turn. So I'm not quite as high on Max Player, those kind of plotters, unless the pace is just absolutely out of control. Mr. Big News, you know, when you see a horse like that at 46-1 run the kind of race that he did, the first things, obviously, any handicapper wants to look at, what advantages did he have? Okay. It wasn't a suicidal pace. So that wasn't an advantage for Mr. Big News. He didn't have a rail trip. He did sneak through along the inside all the way. He actually was disadvantaged by how wide he had to go, 3.5 wide on the first turn, 4 or 5 wide around the second turn. So he gave up ground. Actually would have been closer to Authentic at the finish than he was. I thought it was an outstanding race by Mr. Big News, and very, very, very legit. I agree with you guys that I can't see New York Traffic coming off that Kentucky Derby race. I was told by Sappy Joseph the day before the Kentucky Derby. I asked him where he expected to see New York Traffic with regard to Authentic, the same as the Haskell, or was he going to try a different strategy? Sappy told me we are not going to concede the early lead to Authentic. If Authentic wants the early lead, if Johnny V wants the lead, we're going to make him work for it. I don't think Paco Lopez had the horse to do that.
No, he didn't.
And yeah, and coming off that kind of a race now, as consistent as he was before that, going forward to the Preakness, he's a hard horse for me to take.
Well, I want to go around and start with you, Marty, now on the other horse in here that I think is a really interesting horse. So we'll take a look at her last race, and that's Swiss Skydiver, the filly who's going to take on the boys. It'll be the second time she's taken on the boys. She ran against Art Collector in the Bluegrass and finished second. She finished second in her most recent start in the Kentucky Oaks, and now back in against the boys. Marty, my quick thought on her is I have a great amount of respect for her. I think she's a top filly. I'm just wondering when this admittedly ambitious campaign might catch up with her. I think it's very sporting what they're doing, but I'm just wondering if at some point she regresses from all this. Where are you with her for this race?
Well, I mean, with Midnight Bisou being out of, having been retired, and she would have Monomoy Girl to beat in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. That obviously is going to be her next and last race of this year. I think a few extra points of credit are due to Kenny McPeak and Mr. Callahan for running her here. It's the sporting kind of thing that people really like to see, and gets the interest of a lot of other people. I thought her trip, Jay, down inside in the Oaks was not very good. I thought that Tyler Gaffleone had to stop and start a few times, that she didn't have the smooth kind of trip that both Gamine and She Dares the Devil did. She Dares the Devil was outside of her, kind of keeping her boxed in. It was good race riding by Florent Giroux, and when it was time to go, she pulled away. I think she's really capable. The kind of race she ran in the Bluegrass, I think the key in this Preakness is to get that kind of trip where she can kind of freewheel it early and go on and not be encumbered the way she was in the Oaks. So, you can't bet after the gates open, obviously, but
we think
I would like to see her take a fight. I would, at a front-running race that she had in the Bluegrass, I'd like to see her run that way here on Saturday and kind of take a fight to Authentic.
Randy, what do you think of Swiss Skydiver?
A couple of points. I love Tyler Gaffleone. I did not like his ride in the Kentucky Oaks. I didn't have a problem with him not challenging Gamine early. I think they thought, and we all thought that, that Gamine would, coming off that race that she had run in the test and then before that in the Acorn, that it would probably be an unwise decision to try to go head and head with her early. Where I fault him is Gamine has a long-standing habit that everybody knows about of drifting out, trying to drift out at least during her races. And I think Gaffalione would have been better served staying down on the inside and waiting until Gamine came off the rail at the top of the stretch, which she did, and then come through along the inside instead of losing some ground and coming around outside. So I thought that might have made a difference in the outcome of the race. Second point about Swiss Skydiver, I share your concern, Jay. This will be her 9th start of this year. She's running every month this year except the month of April. I can't believe I'm saying that because we go back to the days when 9 races in a year were nothing.
Right.
But I mean, you do have to wonder if at some point some of these hard races are going to take a toll. And, you know, coming off of 2 back-to-back good races, second in the Oaks and that huge win in the Alabama, you have to wonder if the Preakness is going to be the time where she shows a little bit of regression.
And lastly, I think we'll start bringing in our fan questions in a moment. But before we do that, just the most prominent horse, obviously, who's not in this race is Tiz the Law. I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on him skipping this race. To me, it was a situation of either had to run here and then maybe be done for the year, or if you really wanted to take your best shot in the Breeders' Cup Classic, this was the right thing to do. And so if they're going to run in the Classic, which is their intention, I don't have a problem with them skipping this race. Marty, what do you think of Tiz the Law?
I mean, really, what would they have to win by running in this race? And you know, I stood on this balcony for many years watching Barkley Tagg's horses in action. I would not be one to question him. He pretty much 10 minutes after the Derby said it was a no-brainer to not run and go ahead and look ahead to the Breeders' Cup Classic. I think it's a smart move, and clearly Barkley got his way on that.
Randy?
Again, it's you know, it's almost poisonous for me to say that 4 weeks between races is too short. But I mean, Tiz the Law had come into the Kentucky Derby with his previous races spaced. I think it's 12. This is not chronologically, but 12, 8, and 7 weeks apart. And he was coming into the Derby off of a 4-week gap since a monstrous win in the Travers. And for whatever reason in the Kentucky Derby, which was part of that perfect storm, I think, that led to Authentic's win, Tiz the Law was a couple, maybe 3 lengths off form compared to the Travers. Was it that he doesn't like Churchill Downs? Again, I have a tough time believing that a certain mixture of silt, sand, and clay would be bad for Tiz the Law, but okay for 14 other horses in the Kentucky Derby, right? So I think it had to be the 4 weeks. And I was no doubt in my mind after he lost the Kentucky Derby that Barkley was not going to come back in 4 weeks for the Preakness and then 5 weeks for the Breeders' Cup, that he was going to wait and go into the Breeders' Cup Classic nice and fresh. And it doesn't surprise me at all that that's what they're doing. I think it's the right call.
So that's our thoughts on some of the horses who ran in the Preakness, or I should say are running in the Preakness, those who ran in the Derby and are coming back in the Preakness, some newcomers, and the most prominent horse not running in the Preakness. Now it's time for your questions. So let's see what we've got on the screen here, and hopefully we'll have something from all of our many viewers. But until we do, here we go. Clar74 says, will this be art collectors' time to shine? Marty, I'm going to start with you, since this is a horse that I know you were going to be picking in the Derby if he was in the Derby, and it looks like you're well funded for Saturday.
Love him. I'm betting I might be working for free and then minus if he doesn't win on Saturday. I mean, I can't say enough good things about him. It's a good story for racing, I think, to have a guy like Tommy Drury win a race like this. And I just think he's a superior talent. I really do. I just love the way he strides out. And I think he's, as Brian Hernandez said, he's push button. I mean, he can really sense through Brian's hands what to do. Tommy says it's the smartest horse he's ever trained, et cetera, et cetera. His numbers, as I'm sure Randy would agree, are very competitive. I'm all in.
Randy, what do you think of Art Collector? Maybe if we get a chance, maybe we can take a look at his Bluegrass win over Swiss Skydiver while we're talking about him.
I like him too. Because I think he's got the talent and the tactical ability, as we just mentioned earlier, to put some heat on Authentic in the middle part of the race. And he's proven that he has the ability and the determination to take some heat in the early and middle part of races and still keep running. I mean, you look at his last race in the Ellis Park Derby. First of all, he had to deal with, one of those typical 165-1 Calumet Farm no hope horses that was thrown in, right? So he spit him out, as you would expect, and then he got hooked by this Ohio Derby winner, Dean Martini, who ran up to him, and then he spit him out. And then Dale Roman's horse, Attachment Rate, made a big run at him at the top of the stretch, and then he spit him out and is drawn away impressively to win the last 16th of a mile. Now, again, those three horses aren't top caliber horses, as they showed, Attachment Rate showed in the Kentucky Derby. But I liked the way he won that race. I liked the way he looked in the bluegrass. And to me, I think he's the logical horse for the Preakness.
Let's see what our next question is from our viewers. And it comes from, survey says, final answer.
Hope it's about 1,000 words. We haven't talked about 1,000 words.
Yeah, while we're waiting for that, let's talk about 1,000 words. Baffert's other horse who was scratched out of the Kentucky Derby when he flipped. Well, Randy, you brought it up, so I think the floor is yours. Look at that. Charisse Wolf is obviously reading our minds. Go ahead, Randy. She says, talk to me about 1,000 words with my future book bet, how I cried when he scratched in the paddock. Didn't hurt you as much as it hurt Jimmy Barnes, I can tell you that. I had about $5,000 in winnings coming to me if he had won the Derby. Any thoughts? Go ahead, Randy.
I think he's a bit of an enigma. I think he's got talent. In my opinion, his race in the Shared Belief was about a length, maybe a length and a half better than his race in the Los Al Derby. I thought the Los Al Derby was a better race than a lot of other people think, than a lot of the fig makers think. In the Los Al Derby, I thought he was disadvantaged in that race by the presence of Uncle Chuck. I don't think they really wanted him up there running with Uncle Chuck. It was only a 4-horse field, so he didn't break all that sharply either. So they dropped him back to last. He winds up 3 or 4 wide around the second turn, made a nice little run. There was really nobody else in the race besides those two horses. But I thought he ran pretty well after a couple of really poor efforts. He probably needed the race. He came back. The tactics were to his advantage next time out in the Shared Belief. Because, again, Baffert didn't want to run Cezanne head-and-head with 1,000 words. He's proven he can sit a little off the pace. I think that's what the strategy is obviously going to be in the Preakness. And if he runs his last race back again and the pace is fast enough to compromise Authentic, then I think it's very possible that you could see, as in what we might believe, in our collector 1,000 words exacta.
Marty, what do you think of 1,000 words?
Well, I'm wondering who is going to saddle him, with Jimmy Barnes on the injured reserve. And I've asked Bob Baffert that not once but twice this week. I said, are you going to saddle him? And he hedges and he says, yeah, I am. But I've got it on good authority that Mike Marlowe is coming in from Southern California, just in case Bob needs some help with getting the saddle on this horse. So he was 10-1 when he scratched in the Derby. He was the 4th choice. I would guess he'll be 8-1 or something like that. It's hard for me to envision where he might be. I guess, as Randy said, he might be able to sit mid-pack, but I just kind of think that the way that the Shared Belief came out with Honore P not running that well, and it seemed like kind of an aberration for 1,000 words to run that well. I can't really use him on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm sort of torn on the horse because he went off form earlier this year, and the thing that had been his calling card early in his career was his doggedness. He really has a lot of fight, and we saw that again finally in the Shared Belief. But like you, Marty, I'm skeptical over that number, because to believe that it was as fast a race as it was, you have to believe that Honore P ran as well as he did in the Santa Anita Derby, and visually it didn't look that way. And you have to believe that the 3rd place finisher in that race ran the race of his life, and that Cezanne had run a much bigger figure than he had done in his previous race. So I'm torn on the horse. I don't really know how good he is, and if he's really made progress from 2 to 3. The thing that, like I said, that I liked about the Shared Belief is that at least he was competitive again, and because he was not competitive in a couple of races earlier in the year before he had a freshening. Let's see what our next question is going to be from our viewers.
While we're waiting, I know there's skepticism on that number in the Shared Belief, the 104 buyer speed figure. I know there is. I'm a believer in it.
Okay.
I can't explain the 3rd place finisher, in that race, and how he ran so fast. He came back and ran on the turf and didn't run very well. But Honor AP came back and ran pretty much the same number in the Kentucky Derby, given his trip. All right.
All right, let's talk. We've mentioned earlier that Steve Asmussen has a few horses in here. Marty or Randy, we've got the requisite Calumet long shot and Accession, but we've also got Pneumatic, who's coming off a victory in the Pegasus. He's a lightly raced horse. He's only run 5 times, 3 victories. Randy, I'll start with you on Accession, and then Pneumatic, and then Marty, you come in behind him.
Well, I think you said it right about Accession. It's Calumet Farms' perfunctory horse in a major stakes race, regardless of the price, regardless of what kind of chance they have. They like to run their horse. They like to be present in these big races. Sometimes it pays off on rare occasions. And most other times, I think they're probably doing the horses a disservice at times. As far as Pneumatic, I'd love to own him. I think he's a really cool horse. I think he's a talented horse, but I don't see a race on his form so far that makes him, in my opinion, competitive with Art Collector, Authentic, even Swiss Skydiver. So I've got him in the second tier.
Marty, do you give any chance to either of those horses?
Well, Accession, just for the record, he, according to Steve Asmussen, he had extremely minor knee surgery, which accounts for the lengthy layoff. And as Randy said, occasionally Calumet does blow up the tote board. Last year, in fact, here in the Preakness Everfast, who was an implausible 29-1 only, should have been 129-1. Was second and just made for some huge gimmicks, but that seems not to happen very much. I don't think he has much chance, especially off that layoff. As far as Pneumatic, I think the one telling race for him was in the Belmont when both he and Max Player were pretty much at the same spot with about a half mile to go, and Max Player kind of put him away and beat him by, I think, 3 or 4 lengths. So I would think, and the odds board will reflect this, he'll be about 20-1. But I think that he's one of the outsiders in here too.
And
go ahead, Ray.
And by the way, Accession's last race before his knee surgery, he was second to Nadal in the Rebel at 82-1. So there's another one of your Calumet Farm horses that will every now and then will occasionally pay off.
I don't know that he's going to get a radioactive pace nor an off track like he did that day, which I think were contributing factors. But like you said, once in a while it pays off for them, but the three of us not thinking that's going to happen Saturday. I noticed we did have a fan question just as we started to talk about those two Asmussen runners, so let's go back to it. What do you make of Swiss Skydiver's latest jockey change? I don't know much about the new rider. Well, he's been around a while. Marty, why don't you fill in our guest about Robbie Alvarado?
Robbie Alvarado, I met him in 1994. He'd started riding in 1991 in his native Louisiana. He's gone on to win 5,200 races plus and $220 million in purses. So yeah, he's ridden a couple of horses of the year, Mineshaft and Curlin. And Jay, you and I were talking only a couple of weeks ago, just in a normal phone conversation, and you said whatever happened to Robbie and why, and I can't really put my finger on it. He's 47 years old, which isn't that old for a guy. You got Mike Smith.
He's a kid compared to Mike Smith.
Yeah, so he's just kind of fallen out of favor with a number of horsemen. I can't tell you why, but the reason he has this mount is because there were so few big namers available. Tyler Gaffleone kind of bailed out at the last minute. His agent called me on Saturday, said that he had already lined up a number of choice mounts for this coming Saturday at Keeneland. If Tyler were to come here and ride Swiss Skydiver, who's going to be 8 or 10-1 in the Preakness, he would have had to give up Friday, Saturday, Sunday at Keeneland. They've got all kinds of big races there. And he might have committed to, Kenny McPeak actually alleged that Matt Musicar, the agent for Tyler Gaffleone, had given him a 2-race commitment, Oaks and Preakness. But because Kenny did not commit until last Saturday, that's why Tyler went ahead and chose to ride at Keeneland. And then Kenny was stuck with so many of these other guys and the travel restrictions, et cetera, that go along with this COVID situation, that Kenny reached deep on his bench and got Robbie. And Robbie's, as Kenny said, what makes you think that he's lost something on his fastball? If he's on the best horse on Saturday, he can win the race.
And Randy,
Kenny,
go ahead, Randy.
No, Kenny Kenny reached out to Mike Smith, and Mike wanted to ride Swiss Skydiver, was excited about riding Swiss Skydiver until he found out that meant he would have to be on site Monday. I think that's right, Marty. That's what I was told, and so he decided he wasn't going to give up, all that time in order to be there so early.
Yeah, as far as us media, we had to have a negative test 72 hours in advance of coming here, and I think it might be the same for the jockeys. I did see Robbie this morning out in the barn area, so I don't know if he got here last night or what, or if it was even Monday. I don't know why you would have to be here Monday to ride Saturday, but nonetheless, the whole travel restriction thing, and that means giving up not just the Saturday mounts, but a number of other surrounding dates, and I'm sure that's what Brad Pegram, Mike Smith's agent, took into consideration when turning down Kenny.
Jockeys should be the last thing you pay attention to when you're handicapping races like this, by the way, because they're all good when you get to this level, and the difference between jockey A and jockey B is so negligible and so unpredictable that you might as well not even pay any attention to it, my opinion.
As Shane Sellers once said, I can only ride as fast as they can run. So, yeah.
One of the reasons that we've got the lineup of jockeys in this Preakness Stakes is because there's so much going on this weekend. Mike Smith will be at Santa Anita. It's opening weekend of Keeneland. There's a bunch of big races at Belmont Park on Saturday as well. And for those riders in those locales to have gone to Pimlico, they obviously would have had to have given up a lot on these other cards. And that weighed into a lot of these decisions that were made by these jockeys. But Robbie Alvarado, he has won a Preakness before. He did it on Curlin. We'll see if he can pull it off on Swiss Skydiver. It looks like we've got another question, so let's go to that. And it's from Alan Fisher, who wants to know, how about Mr. Big News, thinking the pace will help him a lot. Any thoughts? Marty, what do you think of the way the pace might help or not help Mr. Big News?
I'd kind of like to defer to our Moss pace figures here and Randy answer that more completely, but I'm just kind of torn as to how it's really going to develop. If you guys think, as I'm thinking it might, that there will be more pressure applied mid-race to Authentic, i.e. by Swiss Skydiver and or Art Collector and or New York Traffic if he runs a big one, then it might fall apart late, and a horse like Mr. Big News would be able to come on and get him. I'd like for Randy to answer that more completely.
Marty, the Moss pace figures concur completely with that astute observation. And also my handicapping opinion aside from speed figures. I mean, I do think, as we've said, that the race is going to be a little bit more competitive pace-wise than it was in the Kentucky Derby, especially the middle part of the race, and maybe even the first part of the race if one of the jockeys really is intent on taking it to Authentic right from the start. And that would help a horse like Mr. Big News, in my opinion. Jay, do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I like Mr. Big News a little bit as a price horse going into the Derby. I thought he ran a terrific race, and obviously if the pace is more contested in the Preakness than it was in the Derby, it would stand to reason it would help him anew. I don't know if he's quite good enough to beat the very top of this group, but I do think that he is a progressive horse who should run well again. Shauna Rotundo, our latest inquisitor, would like to know who else might benefit most from the pace scenario. So, guys, have at it.
Go ahead, Marty.
I mean, if not Mr. Big News, then Max Player. I mean, I don't know who else could really rally off the pace unless you guys are considering 1,000 Words a stalker / closer type, which I just can't go there. So I'm with Art Collector, who I'm completely committed to. I'm going to be using the two potential closers, those being Mr. Big News and Max Player underneath in my exotics.
Randy, anybody else you think can be helped or hindered by the potential pace?
Well, when we say the pace scenario, assuming that the pace scenario is going to be a more aggressive pace scenario, then I think, in my opinion, you would take Art Collector as the likely winner, which we've already discussed. And I think underneath that, I would prefer Mr. Big News and 1,000 Words, because I think 1,000 Words gets the first jump on a deep closer like Max Player. And again, I have a little difference of opinion from you guys about the number and the shared belief.
Let me ask you guys this regarding the early pace. Art Collector is drawn inside of Authentic. I would submit that Brian Hernandez and John Velasquez, their respective riders, are two of the sharpest guys there are when it comes to sizing up a race and putting their horses in the right spot. So to me, there's two potential scenarios here, and it's going to be very interesting to see how these guys react early on. One would be for Art Collector to just go and maybe try and take the track from Authentic. The other would be for Authentic to go and for Brian Hernandez to maybe try and get outside of him. But I would think John Velasquez is going to be cognizant of him wanting to do that. So how do you guys think that opening 3/16 or quarter mile of the first turn is going to unfold vis-a-vis those two horses, especially because of where they're drawn?
Well, first of all, Authentic, when you go back and look at his last 4 races, okay, 4 races back, he runs into San Felipe. He stumbles leaving the starting gate. So he doesn't get off to a particularly fast start in that race. He has to be used. He sets the pace and looks good. Santa Anita Derby, he's got an outside post. He breaks outward at the start and didn't get away to a particularly alert start that day either. The Haskell, he broke like a shot, set the pace. In the Kentucky Derby, he broke maybe a length slowly. He was a couple of lengths behind the early part of the race, which Velasquez said that he had expected, given the fact that he had, again, an outside post position. I think Authentic is a faster horse early than Art Collector. I think in order for Art Collector to beat Velasquez and Authentic to the lead, they're going to have to really be aggressive the first part of the race. And I'm not sure that I would expect that strategy in the Preakness. Okay. But here's what I think could happen, to your point. Authentic goes to the lead. Art Collector sits behind him. Who is just outside of Art Collector? Robbie Alvarado on Swiss Skydiver, who's got about the same kind of speed, early speed, as Art Collector does. So there's the potential for Alvarado to stick Art Collector and Brian Hernandez in behind Authentic and keep Hernandez from flipping out to stalk Authentic like he would probably like to do. So that kind of cat and mouse, that's something Jerry Bailey taught me to look out for, by the way. That's something that you may want to keep an eye on at least.
Marty, how do you envision that unfolding?
What about if Horacio Caramanos on New York Traffic says, this is the only way I can win, let's just go, let's beat Authentic to the lead, let's try and walk the dog and let everybody else follow us? I mean, I think there are 4 solid speed horses in here, including Swiss Skydiver, who, if you'll remember, led Art Collector most of the way in the Bluegrass before he finally got her. But and again, I want to reiterate, I really thought that her trip was not very good at all in the Kentucky Oaks. So, and also something I mentioned earlier, Authentic, I thought the outside post had a lot to do with Johnny being able to smooth him all the way up down that long stretch the first time into the lead. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen here. So 8-5 on Authentic after missing 8-1 in the Kentucky Derby. I think I don't want any part of that.
Yeah, regarding New York Traffic, though, I think even if you quarter horsed him out of the gate, I just don't think he's fast enough to get to the lead. All of his successful races have been in moderately paced kinds of races, and I just don't see him. I don't think it would be to his benefit to be ridden that way, and I don't think even if you rode him that way, he could make the top anyway. Randy, what do you think?
I agree. I was just going to say that, Jay. Looking at his pace in all of his races, he comes out of the Louisiana. Those were very slow-paced races. The Matt Winn was a very slow-paced race. I just don't think he's fast enough. I really don't. Even if they would have to just absolutely whip and drive and send him, in my opinion, to beat Authentic to the front, and I can't see that happening. But I may be wrong. We may be wrong. I mean, he may.
Well, you guys, how many times have we drawn these races up on paper and then
exactly
you go, oh my God, how did that happen? We're talking about the way it all unfolds. So yeah.
Here's a question. Gentleman wants to know about Pneumatic. I think we kind of touched on him a little bit, but Marty, why don't you go first this time on Pneumatic?
Well, he didn't beat much in the Pegasus. I know that. I went back and watched that. Jesus' team was in there, but there was a reason he was 4-5 in there. Again, I think his key race, his most revealing race, I thought, was in the Belmont, which he ran pretty creditably. He was 4th, but when he and Max Player kind of had their own little match race going toward the back, and Max Player got the best of him. So if I had to choose among a 15 or 20 to 1 shot, which they both figured around, I'm going to side with Max Player, especially with him having had benefit of a fairly decent Derby effort.
And Randy, I think you're of similar mind. He's just not quite good enough.
Yeah, in the Matt win, I thought he didn't have the best trip in the Matt win. He was down inside saving ground, which is obviously good, but he was kind of in a precarious spot down on the inside, with horses all around him, kind of in tight. I thought he ran well in that race to finish 3rd considering, but I thought the Belmont was a pretty telling race for him, as Marty pointed out earlier. He was behind Tiz the Law early. He's going to be a mid-pack kind of horse, I think, in this race. I will say this, if you're trying to sort out the various long shots in the Preakness field, when you look at the Pegasus, at one point at about maybe the 3/8 pole, he and Jesus' team were pretty much side by side. And then in an instant, Pneumatic's 2 or 3 lengths in front of Jesus' team. He basically left him for dead in a period of about 1/8 of a mile. So I would much prefer Pneumatic over Jesus' team if you're just trying to prioritize some long shots in there.
We had a question I saw flash up a little bit ago regarding bias. Let's see if we can, and we went on to something else. Here it comes from Dan Lecomte. It says the early races will tell the bias. I'll go first on this. I think bias is one of the most overrated things in racing. I think it happens far less frequently than people than people believe it to happen. I think that a significant bias, whether it's speed or inside-outside, is not something that happens on a regular, sustained basis. Perhaps I'm in the minority to you two guys on that, but I think it's an overrated thing. And I think a lot of times people overreact to logical horses running well in early races and deduce from that whatever style those horses had is some sort of a bias, when really the only bias was that the best horse won.
Randy studies that a lot more than me. I will say the key word there by you, Jay, was overreact to earlier results. And I've kind of taken it on the chin when following a bias and thinking I was being a clever fella, and if speed had been winning, using a speed horse, and boom, here comes the closer to beat me. But I would like to hear Randy's take on that.
All right, I completely agree with Jay with an exclamation point. I think hanging around guys who, you're watching the early races on a card, and a 4 to 5 shot wins wire to wire, and a 6 to 5 shot wins wire to wire, and an even money shot wins wire to wire. Oh, the rail is great. The rail is fantastic. You can't tell that, right? I mean, as you pointed out, they're the best horses. But to me, what has happened in the business is that 25, 30 years ago, you saw a lot more biases than you do now, because handicappers in general, and especially track superintendents who take care of the track, weren't as clued in and weren't as tuned in to looking for biases. Right now we've got, the Steve Davidowitz books and the Andy Beyer books and all these handicapping books, and handicappers galore talking about bias this and bias that. I think track superintendents have their radar up, and they're always looking for signs of a bias. And if they see it, they'll try to correct it as quickly as possible. So I don't think you see it nearly as often as you used to, and nearly as often as a lot of people think.
Well, Randy, we're going to let you go. We know you've got some preparation to do to get ready for the NBC telecast this weekend of the Preakness Stakes, and I imagine you're probably very, very despondent over the Twins being swept by the Astros earlier today.
No surprise.
18 in a row they've lost down the postseason.
That's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
Before you said earlier that you did like Art Collector, but obviously that's never enough for anybody wanting to know who you like. So what about the Exacta or the Trifecta?
I would put, I would primarily put Art Collector over Mr. Big News and Thousand Words. And I think you'd have to. I don't think he would completely throw Authentic out. I would play him underneath in some of your tickets, but I would focus primarily on those three horses.
Very well. Well, thanks for your insights. Thanks for the time, and have a great show on Saturday. And thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Great to see you again, even if it's virtually.
Very much so. Thanks, Randy. Randy Moss from NBC, and now you're just stuck with the Derby Watch duo of Jay Privman and Marty McGee. Let's see if we've got any more questions still in the queue. I think we might have a couple still to go. Monk Uphold wants to know, does New York Traffic have a shot? Marty, we talked a little bit about him earlier. I just don't see how this race comes up well for him. I don't know that he's quick enough to make the lead, and I don't see him sitting a trip and then going by the front runners and then holding off the late runners. Do you have any difference of opinion on that?
I mean, you and Randy both shot me down big time when I suggested that maybe he could quarter horse, that Horacio could quarter horse him out there and try and steal it. But, I just don't know how he could lay off. I'm all in on Art Collector. So to me, nobody else has a shot. And this seems like kind of grasping for straws, I would think, after such a poor effort in the Kentucky Derby off those really consistent prior efforts. So I'm going to say no.
All right, let's see if we've got another one. CJ Ward likes him. Not sure who that is. Maybe if that's referencing New York Traffic. Don't really know. But whoever you like, CJ, good luck. And we're glad you like him.
I invented the mutual windows and express bet and DRF bets. Yes.
Eric Anthony says he's flipping happy about 1,000 words in post 5. I'm not sure. I don't get it.
I saw what he did there. I'm flipping happy.
Right. Yeah.
Get it? Okay.
I do. I got it.
Okay. I hope he isn't flipping happy.
All right. Very good. Eric Anthony will be at the Comedy Store. Make sure you tip your waiters well and enjoy the veal. Eric Anthony also says 1,000 words is a Florida-bred baby, so that's good. Oh, CJ Ward likes pneumatic. Now, okay. All right, now we've gotten some clarification on pneumatic. So, well, good luck.
I'll never talk anybody off at 22 to 1 shot. Master Derby, that's one of the incredible things, Jay, about the Preakness is in 144 prior runnings, the longest shot to ever win was 23 to 1, a mere 23 to 1. So I don't think they'll beat that record again on Saturday. But if you go down in other races like the Belmont and the Derby, you have 50 to 1 here, 50 to 1 here, 91 to 1 on Donerail in the Derby, 71 on Sarava for McPeak back in 2002. Not here at Pimlico. The logical results tend to happen here.
If I'm not mistaken, has Master Derby just been cried?
Master Derby, 1975, ridden by
Darryl McHarg.
There you go.
Trained
by.
Ooh, you got me.
Smiley Adams.
Smiley Adams.
Smiley Adams, yes.
Who brought Smiley Adams around?
Maybe Bob Lehman. I don't know. Maybe his brother Jasper Adams.
Let's see if we've got any last questions. Otherwise, we're going to give you our final thoughts on the Preakness Stakes. And unless one comes in, we're going to give you, here we go. This will be the last one we're going to take. Do you think that the winner and runner-up will be within 5 lengths of the lead? I do, because I think it's a match race between the two fastest early horses in the race in Art Collector and Authentic. I just think they're the best horses, and I think they're going to dominate the race from the start. And Marty, you've said that you're all in on Art Collector.
Winner, yes.
Runner-up, though?
Yeah.
As well?
The runner-up, no.
And who do you think the runner-up potentially can be?
Someone from the back's going to come into the belly, as our man Toby Callett would say, to blow up the perfecta.
Who was that again? I spoke over you.
I like either Max Player or Mr. Big News to come up into the belly from well off the pace.
Very well. Now, you said you're all in on Art Collector, and you've got the bulging bankroll there to prove it. So my question is, in regards to the Preakness, do you envision making only a win bet? Are you going to try and get a live in him to him in sequential wagers? Are you going to try and cold punch exactas? What's your betting strategy?
I'm thinking about just cold punching tomorrow. On Friday, the Brad Cox favorite, Owendale, in the Pimlico Special Preakness Double, seeing what that's going to pay. I would imagine for a $2 play, it might be about $25, something like that, because Owendale will be about even money. And if I don't get alive to that, or depending how greedy I want to be, I'm going to take a long, hard look at some of these earlier races. Race 7 is the DeFrancis on Saturday. That looks like a 2-horse race to me. And then 8, 9, and 10 are all pretty hard. I think I'm committed against Bonnie South and the Black Eyed Susan, but everything, Jay, anything I get alive to is all going to land on Art Collector.
Well, that's Marty McGee's thoughts on the Preakness Stakes. You've heard mine as well, and earlier you heard our special guest Randy Moss's thoughts on the Preakness. We want to thank all of you for watching us on all the different formats today, and we want to thank our friends at Grand Slam Social for setting everything up for us. For Marty McGee, I'm Jay Privman. Hopefully we will see you in a few weeks, and we'll do one of these prior to the Breeders' Cup. Marty, have a great time back there, and don't OD on the crab cakes.
Thanks, pal. Same to you.
All right, pal.